Welcome back to the Dynasty Nerds YouTube page. And today we're going to be talking about 8 guys and trying to determine if these old guys are washed up or if they still got more to offer in 2024. All players get to a point where eventually Father Time catches up with them. Some have much longer runs than others, but eventually Father Time does end up winning. So let's talk about 8 guys that are kind of getting a little bit up there. Guys that might be finally seeing the end of their career, or at least the end of their fantasy career, be right in front of them. So let's get to the first one here. Derrick Henry. Is Derrick Henry washed or not? And I'm going to go with not washed in 2024. Yes, I get it. Some of his efficiency metrics dropped a little bit in 2024, but for fantasy purposes, I'm not overly worried about that. Yeah, maybe he won't be quite as efficient as he was in the past, but he led the league in attempts 4 of the past 5 seasons. So we know that this is a guy that is just truly built different. But at the age of 30, I still think he's got another year or 2 left in him. Reason being, he was in the most terrible situation in Tennessee last year. Literally rated one of, if not the worst offensive line by basically every grading service you look at for offensive line. Everyone had Tennessee at the very bottom. So of course his efficiency was going to be down. That offensive line was truly putrid. Now he goes to a team in Baltimore that's going to feature him like he's always been featured, but it's a little bit better offensive line, and it's a team committed to running the football. And if there's somebody that could open up some lanes for him, it's the threat of Lamar Jackson keeping it on some of those plays instead of giving it to Derrick Henry. So I think we see better things for Derrick Henry, and he is definitely not washed for 2024. Next one we're going to cover is 30-year-old Stefon Diggs. Now, Stefon Diggs, I'm going with washed for Stefon Diggs. Now, this is for fantasy purposes. Once again, this isn't necessarily him as a player overall, but we did see his numbers really plummet towards the end of the last year. First 6 weeks looked really good, but after week 6, not a single 100-yard game the entire season. And he only had 1 touchdown after week 9. So we really saw what could be the beginning of the end for Stefon Diggs, but just as big, he's now on a brand new team. This isn't a team where he's the only show in town anymore. We saw both Tank Dell and Nico Collins have wide receiver 1 stretches. Nico Collins, his was basically all season, and Tank Dell, his was while he was on the field and healthy. So now there's 3 very legitimate wide receivers there, and he's just not going to be able to put up the numbers that we're used to seeing out of Stefon Diggs. Sure, maybe he can be a wide receiver 3 for you now, but he's a far cry from that elite top tier wide receiver 1 that we're used to. So for 2024, I'm going with washed for Stefon Diggs. Number 3, we're looking at Davante Adams. Davante Adams, I am going not washed. We did see his numbers dip a little bit this past season, but I think for him, it had more to do with the quarterback play than anything else. Now, I know what you might be saying, Garrett, doesn't he still have Aiden O'Connell as a starter? Maybe he does, but if he's a starter again, it means he improved quite a bit. But I think it's more than likely that we see Gardner Minshew as the starter. And I know it's not as exciting as a guy getting Kirk Cousins or something like that as their starting quarterback. Let's not forget what Gardner Minshew did last year, though, for a guy that plays very, very similar to Davante Adams. Michael Pittman Jr. Michael Pittman Jr. was wide receiver 13 on the season, by far his best season so far as a pro. So I think we see improved numbers for Davante Adams, and metrics-wise show that he hasn't really dipped at all. He's still a very efficient player, still getting open, still making plays. So I'm not worried about Davante Adams this coming season, and I'm going to go with not washed for Davante Adams in 2024. Next one here, we're going with Keenan Allen. This one breaks my heart to say. I'm going to say washed. And honestly, it's not because of him as a player. I think he is still as good as he's been. I think he's still an efficient route runner. I still think he's going to be able to get open. I think all of those things are still true. But for fantasy purposes, we saw him as an elite player the past year. It's not going to be the case this year. We have a new quarterback situation, and as good as I think Caleb Williams can be, he doesn't have the same rapport right away that he would have had with Justin Herbert. You add into the fact now that DJ Moore is a very efficient and a wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 6 last season, so he's a guy that's going to be getting a lot of run. And they used a first-round top 10 pick on Rome Odunze. And so while Keenan Allen maybe will be wide receiver 2 at the beginning of the year, there's a chance he steps back into that wide receiver 3 role towards the end of the year. So I think the numbers overall efficiency-wise will still be fine, but just the bulk numbers probably won't be there for Keenan Allen this season. So for fantasy purposes, not as a player, but for fantasy purposes, I got to go with washed. Number 5, we have DeAndre Hopkins. We've got back-to-back players that for fantasy, I'm going with washed. Now, DeAndre Hopkins last season had one of the worst separation numbers in the entire NFL, bottom 10. And I know what you're saying. Yeah, that's not his game. He's not a separation guy. But even for his standards, it's dropped quite a bit. He dropped from 2.8 yards of separation over the past 2 seasons to 2.3 in 2023. That's a pretty significant drop off to put him inside that bottom 10. And a lot of the guys in the bottom 10 are names you don't want to be with. Devontae Parker, Michael Thomas, guys like that from last season. So there is legitimate concern from me. And also, I'm just not convinced with Will Levis. They added Calvin Ridley, so that's another significant player that they're going to want to get the football to. So for me overall, I do worry about DeAndre Hopkins, and I think for this year, we're looking at washed for DeAndre Hopkins. Number 6, we've got Cooper Kupp. I've been negative the last 2. Let's go positive here. I'm going not washed for Cooper Kupp. Yes, Cooper Kupp looked as good as ever, and I know you're saying, yeah, but he's been banged up. He's been injured. Yes, he had an injury. And yes, Puka Nacua is there. But Cooper Kupp still had an 87% open rate last year. That was 6th best in the NFL. So we're seeing that Cooper Kupp is still getting open at an elite rate. The scheme, the route running ability from Cooper Kupp are married perfectly. He's still going to get open. He's still going to make plays. And I still think he might be the number 1 option despite the Nacua breakout. So for me, I'm going not washed for Cooper Kupp in 24. Number 7, we've got Austin Ekeler. We're going with washed on this one. I don't think that's a big surprise for most people. I know some people are in on him this year, but I am out. Only 3.5 yards per carry last year. He's been banged up. He was injured. And even that, even if you want to throw those 2 things out the window, which I think those are significant, but he had huge numbers in the red zone the previous 2 seasons. Averaged 4.2 yards and 3.3 yards per carry. This past season in the red zone, 1.7. He's not making guys miss in those short areas like he was before. Not able to break tackles like he was before. And they just didn't have the confidence in him. He had 46 attempts in the red zone in previous seasons, only 27 attempts in the red zone last year. Even from a per game standard, that was lower than the previous 2 years. So you add in that it's a new team trying to figure out a new situation. And Brian Robinson, I think, is going to get a lot of short yardage work near the goal line that Austin Ekeler got before. I think we're definitely looking at a situation where Austin Ekeler is washed. Last but not least, there's no way I'm going to say that this guy's washed. Each and every year, Mike Evans just brings it. 1,000 yards every single year of his career. And in fact, last year, he led the league in receiving touchdowns. He has not fallen off at all. It was the most yards that he had since 2018. Yards per target, so big plays downfield. Yards per target as good or better than every season since 2019. Mike Evans is as good as ever. Him and Baker Mayfield did a lot of good things this past season. Mike Evans, good to go. Definitely not washed in 2024.